I'll just tell you the point of the sermon. Even if you've never been to a Unitarian Universalist church, you may have heard how inclusive we are. The most inclusive of all faiths. So inclusive. And I've got to thinking lately that sometimes being exclusive is not actually a bad thing. That sometimes we think we're being inclusive, but we're actually being the wolves and the storks, and not really serving people the way they need. And then sometimes I think we think we're being inclusive, and we're just allowing bad behaviors in all of our churches. And so I think at the same time we can be more inclusive in a positive way, and less inclusive in a negative way, and more exclusive in a positive and affirming and boundary setting and life-affirming way, and less exclusive in that sneaky, churchy way. Right? Where you can't break into any of the cliques, but they say you can, but you can't. And I got to thinking about this because over the summer, I thought I would look into some new hobbies while I had the free time. I didn't, I just preached all summer. But I found myself online watching videos from local martial arts studios and deciding whether or not I too wanted to get kicked in the face for fun and fitness. I did not. So I went back to preaching, which is a low-contact sport. But one of the videos I saw from a local studio was so intriguing to me. It was strangely compelling, enough so that it gave me pause, and then I wrote a whole sermon about it. And we're here now. I clicked play, and this instructor in his white gi and his belt, looking very chiseled, all the things I'm not, said, and this is a quote, this is an actual quote, over 90% of the people who begin the jiu-jitsu journey never make it to blue belt. And 99% of the people who make it to blue never make it to black. How is it? This man was a great preacher. How is it, he said, that the world's most effective martial art has the highest dropout rate? Well, and then I leaned forward. How is it? Well, he said, jiu-jitsu is super complex and very demoralizing. That's how. Which is really straightforward, isn't it? But this was their recruitment video. And it was the closest I came to signing up. Which is really curious because he used the word demoralizing. I was like, I'm not demoralized. I'm moralized. I'm dedicated. I could do this. Which he just gave me the statistics saying that I probably couldn't. I'm not demoralized. No one asked. And in reality, at that moment, I was literally sitting on my couch, which is a metaphor for inaction. And then I continued doing that. But so why did I feel so inspired? Inspired by hearing that the way forward is difficult and challenging and not for everyone. I mean, for one thing, that's some great reverse psychology, right? If you have kids, you know that. But also, I think that the truth is refreshing. It's really refreshing. I think I'd be more willing to spend money on jiu-jitsu classes having been told it probably won't work out. That I would sign up for something that probably I wouldn't continue. I'd be more willing to spend my money on that than on something that promised to change my life with a 100% success rate. Can you think of some things that have promised to be life-changing, like face creams or those leggings that they sell on Facebook that are like no leggings you've ever worn before? Probably if you're over 40, you don't wear leggings, but Yes, they're supposed to be buttery soft and change everything about your life. 100% success rate. But if the jujitsu didn't work out, I would still be proud that I gave it a shot. This very difficult thing, knowing that it would be hard going in, knowing it might not be for me, I tried. But the leggings, if they didn't work out, I would just feel scammed. The leggings that are supposed to work for every body and every lifestyle, whether you're in jujitsu or the ministry, I feel kind of naturally suspicious because logically and mathematically they can't be for everyone. And the fact that they promise to be for everyone seems deceptive. It seems self-serving. And all of this is to say, we need to stop pretending Unitarian Universalism is for everyone. I think it's deceptive. I like to tell newcomers, please don't get discouraged if you find out this place isn't for you. It happened to me at a Lutheran church when I first decided I needed to be at a place of worship. It was the first place I went. It was around the corner. And it was so welcoming. It was so welcoming that it felt like home, a tiny little church with stained glass windows. And when I discovered shortly after their warm welcome that their theology was not for me, that I could not recite the creed that Jesus Christ was my Savior, I was so demoralized and lost. This is not what I had been promised from this saving place. And now I know that it's super common for people to do church shopping. It's really common before they find a place that's for them, earnestly for them. And as a faith movement that encourages exploration and inquiry, we encourage you to find yourself and your own path. I think we should understand that this honestly might not be the place for everyone who walks in our doors. I hope earnestly that everyone who comes in here finds a warm welcome and a spiritual home, and I acknowledge that they might not. And we can still encourage them on their way, send them with our blessings that they find what they need, whether it's at the Buddhist temple or at the Muslim Interfaith Center down the street, or serving on the Interfaith Earth Keepers. The universalism part of our name refers to our soteriology, which is a big word for salvation. Universalists don't believe in hell. They believe that if there is an afterlife, which we're not sure, but if there is, it would be universal. There would be universal salvation. It would be for everyone. No one would be damned. And as an extension of that theology, in this life, Universalists believe everyone is worthy of dignity. That doesn't mean everyone is good. Some people do very bad things, but it doesn't mean we condemn anyone as being inferior to others naturally. No one is what they do. No one will be eternally damned. What universalism does not mean is that this religion should be universal, or that our goal as a faith movement is to replace other religions, or somehow meet the spiritual needs of everyone on earth wherever they are, culturally or in their life's journey. We can't, and it's culturally arrogant to assume that we should, or that we can. Why on earth would we assume that this is for everyone? I've told you before that I recoil at those very well-meaning bumper stickers that say my religion is kindness, because I think it devalues the religions of others. We don't need to pretend that Islam and Buddhism and Taoism and Christianity are all essentially the same thing in order to respect them. We can and should acknowledge that there are vast differences between religions, and that's more than okay. We can respect them in their difference. Why would I assume that Unitarian Universalism is interchangeable with Islam? When compared to Islam in particular, our religion lacks discipline and ritual. There is a real spiritual truth that can only be obtained by dedicating yourself to daily prayer, to annual fasting, to performing the giving of alms and being mindful of how you dress, that our religion cannot provide. Nor does it try to, nor necessarily should it. Nor should we pretend that it does. There are many Muslim Unitarian Universalists in our denomination, and Jewish Unitarian Universalists, and Christian Unitarian Universalists, and you might be one. There's also a steadily growing number of Buddhist Unitarian Universalists, and I have not heard anyone say, well, this is really just the same thing as where I used to go, so it doesn't matter. It very much matters. And for those of us who left childhood churches, where we no longer felt welcomed or belonged, we know there is a difference, and it does matter. Which brings me back around to my earlier question. Why would we assume that this is for everyone? I think pretending that we can be all things to all people is born out of an insecurity. An insecurity about being one of the smaller faiths in America right now. An insecurity out of being dismissed as hippies and liberals. And I urge you to take root in the history and strength of our faith, which goes back centuries, is grounded in real theology, and had people burned at the stake for their conviction that all people are worthy. This is not something we invented in the 60s. You don't need to be insecure. And I also think it's born out of a sense of pride. We pride ourselves on being welcoming and inclusive because we know what that's worth. It's so central to our theology. And I think we are welcoming and inclusive, but I do have two warnings for you today about being welcoming and inclusive. The first is that right now, as things are in our culture as a denomination, not necessarily this church, but as a denomination, lots of people don't feel welcome in our churches. And we really need to listen to them if we don't want that to be the case anymore. Unitarian Universalists are, according to Pew, the most highly educated denomination in the country. And when I was a bartender, I felt like nobody at my church understood where I was coming from, or what my life was like as a member of the working class in the service industry. Furthermore, Unitarian Universalists of color have been saying for several centuries that it's super unnerving to come to church with almost all white people who mean very well, just like the wolves and the storks meant very well, but who randomly say hurtful things that they don't understand and then deny that it happened. They deny that it was hurtful because they meant well. And then wonder out loud why more people of color don't attend UU churches. The past couple of years, there's been a resurgence in our denomination of our reckoning with white supremacy culture. And before you jump out of your seats, again, that doesn't mean Nazism. It just means the elevating of whiteness as a cultural factor, of whiteness as being the best way of doing everything. And I think we're now finally acknowledging as a denomination that that doesn't have to be the case. But I've heard some Unitarian Universalists protest that the term white supremacy culture is too harsh, that white supremacy culture is not real. And the irony is that both of those protests are the peak of white supremacy culture. That's it, that's that you're doing it, right? Instead of being willing to address racism as it crops up in our churches, complaining instead that the real problem isn't racism, it's all these people complaining about racism. Yes, and if you're sitting with some discomfort right now, I'd invite you to just sit with some discomfort right now. It's okay. And I'd invite you to commit to making it better. And that doesn't mean you need to fix it all by yourself right away today. No one is putting that on you. No one person can do it. Mostly it just means keeping an open mind and listening to and believing people of color, especially our faith leaders, because we as a denomination do have more work to do to become more inclusive. And my goodness, if I could just wave a magic wand and make anything happen on this earth, it would just be to make people believe each other, especially to make white people believe their friends and neighbors of color. So while we strive to be inclusive of everyone as a denomination, sometimes we're just not. And by pretending that we are, we pretend that the problem must lie with people who don't feel comfortable here. It's not us. Like, they're just not ready for the message of Unitarian Universalism. But I think that's the wrong kind of exclusive. There are plenty of Unitarian Universalists of color, indigenous UUs who are totally open and welcome to our message and have braved the discomfort of attending a 98% white church to do it. Our message is just fine. The issue is not other people. In proclaiming our inclusivity, we sometimes wind up, however, including behaviors we shouldn't while excluding people we shouldn't. And I'd like to elaborate on this a little bit. UU churches allow people to behave so badly without calling them back into covenant because we believe all should be welcome. And I reiterate once again that all are welcome, all behaviors are not. And there is an epidemic in our churches across this country of people taking over committee meetings, and I'm not saying that happens here, because no one will tell them to rein in their behaviors. We can be loving of one another, be inclusive of one another without allowing our fellow church members to one another. I've talked before about generalized church creepiness, where often, but not always, it's men get too close, give too many hugs, are just so well-meaning that no one feels emboldened to tell them to take a step back. Because Unitarian Universalists, we welcome everyone. Why would we be so exclusive? Because it makes for a healthier, stronger, safer church. We can be both inclusive in a loving way and exclusive in a loving way. In the 1980s, sociologists Rodney Stark and William Bainbridge did a study to find out why people stay at churches. And it was not what they were expecting. They found that churches that make the biggest demands on their members, that have the highest expectations of behavior, retain more members. You would think that by being fully inclusive all the time, everyone would feel welcome here, but actually by being absolutely inclusive, we create an environment where a lot of people don't feel welcome here. Stark and Bainbridge found that costly demands, they wrote, costly demands on behavior, expectations, strengthen a religious group in two ways. First, they write, they create a barrier to group entry. This is very scary to Unitarian Universalists. A barrier to entry? They write, no longer is it possible to merely drop in, like whenever you feel like it, and reap all the benefits of membership while not being held accountable for your role in the community. To take part at all in strong religious movements, they say, you must qualify by accepting the sacrifices demanded by everyone, that you'll adhere to covenant, that you agree to show up, that you agree to participate, even when you don't like the direction that the church is going, that you don't just show up on the Sundays when you like who the preacher is. The church is not the preacher. They write, these costs, the costs of participating, of committing, of agreeing to behave well, act as a non-refundable registration fee. Non-refundable in terms of your time and effort, which measure the seriousness of interest in the product, just like a jiu-jitsu studio. Are you willing to show up and get kicked in the face once in a while? But to strengthen yourself, set good boundaries, and come back, only those willing to pay the price, they say, qualify. Oh my gosh, that sounds so antithetical to universalism. But I think we can reconcile these two things: our desire for inclusivity and our need to have a thriving, healthy, committed faith movement. Commitment is energy, it's investment, it's not just financial resources. A blogger online, who I won't name, wrote, "Is it any wonder that Unitarian Universalism tends to generate low levels of commitment? It is very easy, I would even say too easy, to join our congregations." And that gave me a lot to think about. Is it as easy to join a UU congregation as to snap up a pair of leggings, thinking it will totally change your life? Or can we have a faith movement that's more like a jiu-jitsu studio, but hopefully with better statistics of retention, with more than 1% achieving salvation here, where you do have to put in the work, where you will be expected to comport yourself in a civil way, where you can be inclusive of all, welcoming to others, and agree to work on yourself to make that space available for all. I will leave you with that to think on.